Alright guys, such comic again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So for another day of shocking results in the Call of Duty League, the Carolina Royal Ravens continue their reign of terror, vanquishing Toronto Koi, the roster, let's not forget, that destroyed LA Thieves last weekend. What does this mean? Are Ravens just that team? Are they going to make a threat for this championship after bringing on Exceed instead of Slasher? Or are Thieves just that bad? If Toronto lost to this team and destroyed Thieves as we saw previously, very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Scrap was talking with Hitch about the events of the last couple of years. We know that Hex revealed last season he was very interested in the possibility, despite winning the 2024 World Championship, of bringing on Scrap and HyDra. They didn't do it. It all worked out in the end. They got Mercules. But as we understand right now, Thieves may be going through some of their difficulties and maybe exemplified again by what we have seen in the server today. Now, FaZe, we're going to discuss their series last. There won't be too much to say on it. It was rapid. We did see, after they beat OpTic last weekend, potentially taking a big step in the right direction. Karma says, look, Drazah didn't really spawn in, but now he is. It's obviously a different story, playing a bit of old school RuneScape. No issues with that. Just quickly, we've talked about Havok a lot over the last couple of days, and I think understandably given what's been happening with the Stallions. Now, Havok has decided he's stepping away. He's not going to be competing any longer this season. Who knows? Maybe he'll be back at some point. There's been a lot of drama with Swooti, among others, in recent days. However, Huntsmen were considering, as we understand, Nero to go to the Pro League. That could still happen. It may not be over yet. OpTic play Thieves tomorrow, and if that doesn't go well for Thieves, who knows? Maybe they pull the trigger before we turn up to Dallas. Nero, they have an option on him if they want to sign him. He's looked pretty good for the Huntsmen, as we know. In that eventuality, they would need another player. So Havok spoke to Zinni and was like, look, if that was to happen, Nero gets signed, you need a fourth man. Could that potentially be me? But Zinni apparently said, no, not under my watch as a general manager. Not necessarily anything against Havok, I think, on this one. It's more so that the team Huntsmen, they want to be younger talent that is less experienced. They want to have really 4 players that need to learn a lot and understand about Call of Duty and could be potential Pro League prospects yet again. Now, Havok can be good for guidance and veteran experience with certain teams. We thought that would be the case for Stallions. As it turned out, they had a bit of drama behind the scenes, of course, but I think Huntsmen believe they're getting that anyway. They've got Zinni to an extent, but they've also got Major Maniac coaching the team. They probably don't feel like they need a player like Havok in the roster, if that was to be necessary at some point. But we shall see, and treat to your thoughts, as always, in the comments below. Just quickly, we saw some Overload played again today. Not what Falcons did. I think Overload has somewhat slowed down in recent days in terms of the play. But there is a question of what we can do about the Falcons park the bus strategy that we saw yesterday. I'm sure that they will be using it again. Look, is it balanced? Maybe. I think the question for some would be, okay, if you want to grab the ball and run back to spawn, yes, you've got to play kind of 3v4 because one's got a pistol. But if one of your guys dies, he spawns up close. If the attackers die, they're spawning all the way out. They've got to wait even longer to set up the pinch. So, yeah, it's probably not optimal the way that it currently is. Ideally, if the other team is parking the bus, the attacking team's spawns might get a little bit more favorable. But Daniel Say is atted by Marky B, and he says, look, could we consider 3-minute halves, but when the ball's in position, the clock stops? This directly addresses the camping, as we've seen before. So if you camp, the clock doesn't go down. It's an option. When you cap 4 points in the first half, the other team should only have the same amount of time to cap like uplink, because, yeah, it doesn't really make much sense the way that the rules work in terms of the mercy rule and stuff. We did see it come into play today. Again, he's adding Daniel Say from the league's perspective here. Nice try, but we'll see if that gets to the developers and they can get anything done. I do think there are changes necessary to Overload. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more by now. Hopefully after Major 1 we might have something further to talk about. But let's talk about the matches of this evening. This is an interesting statement that JCap made. This actually was after last weekend's games. He was reviewing that Toronto versus Thieves game that we will discuss again in a second because it is certainly relevant to tonight's results. But he was actually roasting JoeDeceives and saying that in certain instances, Joe's not playing that well as a team. Of course, he's got experience coaching him as well. Just interesting because nobody's really critical of JoeDeceives, and I think understandably so. The guy's been out of control, one of the best subs in the game right now. And he also had some great maps today. But it is interesting for sure that JCat was saying, look, Joe and the way that this Toronto team plays, is not optimal. They still beat Thieves very handily, which is concerning for those guys. But he was of the opinion that the way that they were playing was not exactly ideal last week, and maybe felt that they could be somewhat vulnerable to a Burger King onslaught today. Now, this series was frustrating. Boston versus Heretics. I saw Boston go up, as they did, 239 to 169. I mean, they were at 197 to 127. That's when I saw it, and I thought, you know what? Boston can lose this. They can find a way to lose this, because this is just what they somehow find a way to do. But it's, yeah, this was a historic collapse out of the Boston breach. Such an awful map to lose. I don't know how they do it, but, like, they do like bottling maps like this, Boston. And fair play to Heretics. They brought this one back. But wow, Boston should not have lost this map. They had a couple of chances. To be fair, Metals called in a streak and they had that going for them. But you can't be up 240 to 170 and lose the map. It's just not going to happen. It came down to the wire here on the Scar. Heretics eventually get the win. Fair play to Boston that they didn't totally mentally collapse after this. They actually bounced back and won the search, which was surprising. And look, if they'd have won this map, it could have been a very, very different story in the series, but it was not, and Heretics got over the line in the end. Yeah, weird one for Boston. I'm not saying it serves them right exactly, but you guys remember last weekend when there was a little bit of talk coming out of Purge about what, you know, the reason why they lost the series. They got reverse swept, as remember last weekend. They had a bad result then. They needed really their get back today if they wanted a good chance to start in the winners bracket. They can still do it, but today was quite critical, really, between Boston and Heretics, both on the verge of not making it to winners. They've now got one more weekend to fight for their opportunity, really. But Purge was saying that effectively they got slammed last weekend because they didn't have the chance to practice. Snoopy was getting his visa sorted. You know what? Fair excuse to a degree. But if you are going to come out and make that excuse, you better not bottle it the next weekend as well. That's the issue, and that's kind of what's happened today. Wrinkle started off this overload 3-10, and they were down 1-0. It was actually looking pretty good for Boston, but Heretics made the most of their better side. Zuma says Trakes, former Stallion, you know what happens, he's going to turn up and fry. And that's what they did, right? They win the game 1. Eventually, the overload goes their way as well. Super had a mega map here. He was 26-14. And the decider Blackheart wasn't especially close. Both Cammy, to be fair, Cammy, Nasty and Purge were all running into the absolute blend. I don't know what these clowns were doing. Fair play for them getting 170 points when getting outslayed that bad. But you're never going to win when your AR duo is minus 24 and your secondary sub is minus 15. What an absolute disaster coming out of Boston. So yeah, brutal. I mean, that map 1 is just, yeah, you can't lose that. I mean, look at the numbers here. Just a brutal one to lose for them. And yeah, big questions, right? As Cammy says, GG's Miami, I've got to slow down and learn how to get a kill. Series is on me. Need to be better against Cloud9. Again, critical series of Boston against Cloud9 tomorrow. Now, they lose that, their winners bracket shot is cooked. And again, people are going to start talking about it. I'm talking about it. This tweet or this comment from Purge last week to say, look, we're under practiced, right? And okay, fair enough. But this weekend, they played Heretics, they played Cloud9. They've got to win tomorrow, no doubt about that, if they want any chance of rescuing this early part of the season. But this series was the most critical one. It was Toronto versus Ravens, and Toronto win the game 1. It was reasonably competitive, but Toronto handled business. JoeDeceives had a fantastic game 1. He was like 30-18. Looked like, okay, Ravens, they dropped Slasher for Exceed. They made the change. They've got better, for sure, with the change. We saw that last weekend. But there were questions how much better they could really get. Slasher said something pretty interesting on the show last week, and I'm intrigued to see how this story develops. But if you guys are unfamiliar, Slasher was removed, and Exceed had a few words to say after last weekend, and basically said that some of these veterans, kind of implying Slasher, don't really know how to use the talent that's on their roster. The Exceed implication, he didn't call out Slasher by name, but he basically said some of the veteran players, they want to tell their talented youngsters what to do too much, whereas really you should just let them play. And Exceed seems to be of the opinion that he's doing a better job with that from a leadership perspective than Slasher did. And look, right now, you can't deny the evidence on that front. Slasher, though, said on the show, look, do what you like online. Let's see how it goes on LAN. And I think that's the interesting piece of this debate. Slasher's opinion was, okay, you might be right in terms of getting the best out of these guys for some online series, but from Slasher's perspective, he's been at a Sunday every year he's played. Even last year with the Ravens, they made a Sunday at the first major in Madrid, right? So the question from Slasher's side is, okay, sure, maybe this is good for online COD and it's going to get you to a winner's bracket, but is it going to work to try and make a deep run in a tournament? that's where Slasher believes that more fundamental play is necessary. So we shall see, right, what happens here. But it's fascinating to watch the Ravens because they're kind of looking now without Slasher just as good as they did this time last year, but in a different way. This time last year, Ravens were a threat, but predominantly because they would win every search and destroy. They'd play fundamentally quite disciplined. They had Slasher, they had TJ, they'd win all the searches. Gwinn and Vivid was the roster. Very different team now. But they're playing at a similar level. They're upsetting. They're making good results. They're looking like a serious force. But they're quite a different team. They're a faster-paced team. They're not doing it just in search, although they did win this search and it was critical for them to do so. So I'm really fascinated to see how these guys get on at the major now, especially because they're making rapid progress. But this win against Toronto was huge. Craze has a mega map. I mean, Exceed made the shots. He called the shots on this final round. He said, we're just going to run down mid, do the whole nade shot ghosts freight strategy back in the day, just going to send it down train alley. And that's kind of what they do. They run down mid. Craze gets all the kills. He ends up, mega positive. They win this game. They then go on to win the overload. And then, frankly, they dominated the final Blackheart hardpoint. Exceed had a mega map, Craze had a takeover. They play with some serious pace. That is the way you've got to approach this game right now. And Ravens handled business, honestly, with not even too much difficulty. This is another clip from that search and destroy slightly earlier on. Craze is in a 1 versus 3, gets the first kill, gets the second kill onto JoeDeceives, and then guns the third as well. I mean, yeah, remarkable 1v3, really. It's difficult to imagine that they should have been letting him clutch this, but I think Toronto probably thought, oh, well, we're already up 1-0 in the series. These Ravens guys, they're not too much of a threat. Craze takes advantage of it. That was crucial to get them to the round 11, and once they got there, Craze got the job done as well. So they win the search and destroy, they win the overload, they win the map 4. And they talk all kinds of trash. I mean, I think Craze had a few words, these guys are trash, or whatever he said in the comms. And you can see the reaction. JoeDeceives has got out of there, right? He's straight out of his chair, he's disappeared. Obviously, ReeaL inside CleanX pretty frustrated. They'll still be fine. But it's a question on Toronto, and therefore by implication, a question on the Los Angeles Thieves. Thieves have only played 1 game this year. It was against Toronto, and they got slammed bad 3-0. Toronto have then come out the next weekends. They've played a Ravens team that obviously have been making progress, but most people would say are absolutely top 6 at the very best. I guess we'll see on that one. And they get the job done against Toronto as well. We can look at the numbers here. The game 1, 251-59, relatively comfortable. Joe has a 1.7. Looks like, okay, it's back to business as usual. But after that, search and destroy, the game was changed. They won the Scar overload 3-1. Exceed had a mega map, and then he kind of did the same thing on the final map of the series as well. So it's online COD. It's early days. Take it as you will. But it's absolutely relevant, right? Because this is important in terms of the implications. Toronto, how good are they? Are they the 4th best team still? They've just got beat by the Ravens. Are the Ravens better than that? And this is a team that just destroyed Thieves. So that's the question, right? What type of Thieves are we going to get tomorrow when they play OpTic? It's going to be a crucial question if Kenny wants to stay in that team, frankly, in the near future, and if that team is not totally mentally compromised. The final series that won't take long to cover was FaZe versus Cloud9. Kind of felt this coming, but FaZe, after beating OpTic, they have gone from strength to strength. And look, are they favourites for the major right now? They might have to be, as it stands. They've beaten all the best teams pretty much in recent weeks. They're now making strides. They handle business against a Cloud9 team that, were pretty poor today, really. But they pushed Ravens, or they pushed Paris, Gentlemate, to game 5 last time out. Cloud9 had nothing to answer today. This was a really impressive series out of 0-4, especially. Both of these screenshots I've got here, this was early days in that overload, but it went to 8. I mean, 0-4 just had a mega map. If I hit the refresh here on this decider, FaZe Vegas got the job done at a very, very hot 3-0. 0-4 had a 1.9 the first map with a 40 bomb. Game 2, he had a 2.7. And map 3, he eventually was a 1.28. It was Abuzah who took over at the end. But yeah, Cloud9 got slammed bad in this. I mean, it's pretty rare you see the whole team at 0.7 something and below. That was the case here today for Cloud9. So yeah, FaZe looking like a serious force. But the big question will remain, what does it mean for the rest of the teams? I think we have a good idea how good FaZe currently are, how good OpTic currently are, how good Gentlemates currently are, given their recent results. Falcons look like a threat. Now Ravens look like a threat, but where do Toronto and Thieves sit? That's the question. Toronto should still be in the conversation, you would think, but today was questionable, to say the very least. I guess similar to what happened between Gentlemates and the ReeaL Falcons yesterday. But then Thieves, I mean, where are they in this conversation among the top teams? Because we're now putting Ravens and Falcons above that conversation. Tomorrow will be a big deal. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.